The peaceful colony. The Serena colony drifted through space like a shimmering jewel against the infinite darkness. Within its protective biodome, artificial sunlight bathed carefully tended gardens where families enjoyed their evening walks. Children's laughter echoed through the peaceful streets, mixing with the gentle hum of life support systems. 7-year-old Aaliyah skipped along the garden paths, her auburn curls catching the synthetic sunlight as she chased after a mechanical butterfly. The delicate robot fluttered just out of reach, its iridescent wings programmed to mimic nature's most beautiful creatures. She giggled as it landed briefly on a flower before dancing away again. "Careful, sweetheart," her mother called from a nearby bench, smiling at her daughter's boundless energy. Aaliyah waved back, her attention already captured by the butterfly as it led her toward the outer observation deck. Through the transparent walls, stars twinkled like scattered diamonds, and she pressed her small face against the cool surface, marveling at the cosmic ballet outside. What she couldn't see was the sleek shadow that had been watching them for weeks. The Zorak stealth ship hung motionless above the colony, its dark hull nearly invisible against the void. Inside the vessel, reptilian figures studied the peaceful scene below with cold calculation. Their scaled skin gleamed under the ship's harsh lighting, and their yellow eyes held no warmth or compassion. Commander Grax stood at the observation window, his towering frame casting long shadows across the bridge. Jagged scars crisscrossed his face, telling stories of countless battles and conquests. His clawed hands pressed against the control panel as he watched the human child play below. "The specimen appears suitable," hissed one of his subordinates, pointing at Aaliyah with a taloned finger. Grax's lipless mouth curved into what might have been a smile on a more benevolent creature. "Yes, she will serve our purpose perfectly. Begin the extraction." Below in the garden, Aaliyah had finally cornered the mechanical butterfly near a fountain. She cupped her hands gently around it, careful not to damage its delicate wings, when a strange shimmer appeared in the air above her. The shimmer widened into a portal, crackling with energy that made her hair stand on end. Before she could cry out, a beam of light enveloped her small body. The last thing the colonists heard was her terrified scream as she was yanked skyward, the mechanical butterfly falling forgotten to the ground. By the time people looked up, searching for the source of the sound, the Zorak ship had vanished, leaving only a fading trail of ions in its wake and a colony forever changed by loss. The prison ship. Aaliyah awakened to the cold bite of metal against her cheek. The gentle warmth of the colony's artificial sun was gone, replaced by harsh fluorescent lighting that hurt her eyes. She pushed herself up on trembling arms, her small body aching from the violent abduction. Around her stretched a cavernous cargo hold filled with cages of every shape and size. Strange creatures from across the galaxy huddled in their prisons, some whimpering, others growling softly, all sharing the same look of despair in their alien eyes. The air reeked of fear and unwashed bodies, making her stomach churn. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice barely audible above the ship's mechanical humming. Her question was answered by the sound of approaching footsteps, sharp claws clicking against metal deck plating. 2 Zorak guards emerged from the shadows, their reptilian faces showing no emotion as they unlocked her cage with practiced efficiency. "Time to go, little human," one hissed in broken universal standard, his forked tongue flickering between razor-sharp teeth. Aaliyah pressed herself against the back of her cage. "I want to go home. Please, I want my mommy." The guards ignored her pleas, their scaled hands reaching in to drag her out. She fought as hard as her small body would allow, her fists pounding uselessly against their armored hides, but it was like striking stone walls. They hauled her through corridors lined with more cages, past control rooms where Zorak technicians worked at glowing consoles. The ship was massive, she realized, a floating prison carrying hundreds of captives from dozens of worlds. Finally, they reached a chamber dominated by a massive viewport. Through the transparent aluminum, Aaliyah could see a dark planet rotating slowly below. Its surface was shrouded in perpetual twilight, broken only by patches of sickly green light that pulsed like infected wounds. "Behold Kryn," rumbled a deep voice from the shadows. "Your new home." Commander Grax stepped into the light, his imposing figure making Aaliyah feel smaller than ever. His yellow eyes studied her like a scientist examining a lab specimen, calculating her worth with cold precision. "You will serve a great purpose, little human," he continued, gesturing toward the planet below. "Our finest warrior requires motivation. You will provide that motivation." Despite her fear, Aaliyah lifted her chin defiantly. "I won't do anything for you." Grax's laugh was like grinding stone. "Oh, but you will. You see, you don't have a choice in the matter." He nodded to his guards, who began dragging her toward another section of the ship. Through the viewport, the dark planet grew larger as they descended toward its surface, carrying Aaliyah toward a fate she couldn't yet imagine. The Beast's Lair. The Zorak facility on Kryn's surface was a fortress of black stone and twisted metal, built into the planet's mountainous terrain like a cancerous growth. Aaliyah was dragged through corridors lit by the same sickly green glow she'd seen from space, past laboratories where unimaginable experiments took place behind reinforced doors. They stopped before a massive gate reinforced with bands of alien steel. Beyond it, Aaliyah could hear something moving in the darkness, heavy footsteps and the sound of breathing that reminded her of distant thunder. "Our greatest creation waits below," Grax announced with twisted pride. Gorak was bred for war, designed to be the perfect weapon. But lately, he has become uncooperative. The gate groaned open, revealing a circular pit that descended into shadow. The walls were smooth and impossibly steep, clearly designed to prevent escape. Bioluminescent moss clung to the rocks, providing the only light in the depths below. "Perhaps the presence of something small and fragile will remind him of his purpose," Grax continued, his voice echoing in the chamber. Before Aaliyah could react, she was shoved forward. Her scream echoed off the walls as she tumbled into the abyss, landing hard on the rocky floor below. Pain shot through her small body as she struggled to breathe, her lungs burning from the impact. The pit was enormous, carved from living rock with walls that disappeared into darkness above. The air was thick and humid, carrying strange scents that made her nose wrinkle. Somewhere in the shadows, something large was moving. A deep rumble vibrated through the ground, growing stronger as whatever it was approached. Aaliyah pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering as she stared into the darkness. Then she saw the eyes. Two silver orbs emerged from the gloom, reflecting the dim bioluminescent glow like mirrors. They belonged to a creature unlike anything she'd ever seen, massive and gorilla-like but covered in midnight black fur that seemed to absorb light. Scars crisscrossed its face and chest, telling stories of battles fought in this very pit. Gorak stepped into the light, his full size becoming apparent. He stood nearly 8 feet tall, his muscled arms longer than Aaliyah was tall. His massive hands could have crushed her without effort, and his mouth held teeth designed for tearing and crushing. The beast approached slowly, each footstep sending tremors through the ground. Aaliyah squeezed her eyes shut and whispered, "Please don't hurt me. Please, I just want to go home." But instead of the attack she expected, she heard something unexpected, a soft, questioning grunt. Opening her eyes, she found Gorak crouched a few feet away, his head tilted as he studied her with those strange silver eyes. There was intelligence there, she realized. Intelligence, and something else, loneliness that matched her own. "You're not going to hurt me, are you?" she whispered. Gorak rumbled softly, a sound that was almost like a sigh. Slowly, carefully, he settled onto the ground, making himself smaller and less threatening. For the first time since her abduction, Aaliyah felt a tiny spark of hope. Above them, the Zorak watched in amazement as their perfect weapon lay down before a human child, his fierce eyes now gentle as moonlight. An unlikely bond. Days passed in the pit, measured only by the dimming and brightening of the bioluminescent moss that followed some alien rhythm. Aaliyah and Gorak had developed their own language of gestures, sounds, and shared understanding that transcended species. When Aaliyah grew cold in the damp air, Gorak would lie beside her, his massive body radiating warmth like a living furnace. When she cried for her parents, he would hum in a deep, resonant voice that somehow reminded her of her mother's lullabies. And when the Zorak above withheld food to try to drive him into a murderous rage, Gorak would dig edible roots from the walls and share them with her, always ensuring she ate first. "You were like me once, weren't you?" Aaliyah asked one day, sitting cross-legged beside the great beast. "You had a family too, before they took you." Gorak's silver eyes grew distant, and he made a low sound that might have been agreement. His massive hand, so gentle despite its size, reached out to touch her hair with the care of a parent. Above them, Commander Grax paced the observation deck in fury. His perfect weapon had become a guardian, his instrument of destruction now a protector. The sight of them together, the small human child and the massive beast, filled him with rage that made his scaled skin flush darker. "Release the challengers," he snarled to his subordinates. The massive gates around the pit's rim groaned open, and 3 reptilian predators bounded into the arena. These weren't prisoners, they were hunting beasts bred specifically for combat, their armored hides gleaming like polished steel and their red eyes burning with predatory hunger. Gorak immediately moved between the threats and Aaliyah, his posture shifting from gentle giant to fierce protector. He rose to his full height, letting out a roar that shook dust from the walls and made the predators hesitate for just a moment. "Stay behind me," he seemed to communicate through a protective gesture, placing one massive arm in front of Aaliyah. The first predator lunged with lightning speed, but Gorak was faster. His fist connected with the creature's skull with a sound like thunder, sending it crashing into the wall. The second circled around, trying to reach Aaliyah, but found itself facing Gorak's protective fury. The battle was brief but intense. Gorak fought not just for survival, but for someone he'd grown to love. Each blow he struck was precise and devastating, driven by a need to protect the small life that had brought light into his dark world. When the last predator fell, Gorak immediately turned to check on Aaliyah. She threw her small arms around his massive leg, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered into his fur. "Thank you for protecting me." Above them, Grax's rage reached a boiling point. If he couldn't turn his weapon against the child, perhaps he could turn the child against his weapon. A cruel smile spread across his reptilian features as a new plan began to form. The real test was about to begin. The final choice. The voice that echoed through the pit was cold and calculating, amplified by hidden speakers built into the walls. Commander Grax's words fell like ice into the warm bond that Aaliyah and Gorak had built together. "How touching," the Zorak commander sneered. "But playtime is over. You have a choice to make, little human." A section of the wall slid away, revealing a control panel with a single red button. Above it, a holographic display showed the Serena colony, Aaliyah's home, where her parents were probably still searching the stars for their lost daughter. "That button controls a weapon aimed at your precious colony," Grax continued. "Press it, and your people die. Refuse, and we will turn our pet loose on every human settlement we can find. Either way, blood will be spilled. But you can choose whose." Aaliyah stared at the button in horror, her small hands trembling. Around her, she could feel Gorak's protective presence, but even he couldn't shield her from this terrible choice. "There is, of course, a third option," Grax added with mock kindness. "Convince the beast to resume his role as our weapon. Let him return to what he was created for, and we might find mercy for both your people and yourself." Aaliyah looked up at Gorak, whose silver eyes reflected her own anguish. In them, she saw understanding. He knew what was being asked, and she realized he would do it. He would sacrifice his newfound peace, return to being a monster, if it meant saving her and her people. But as she stared into those gentle eyes, Aaliyah understood something that Grax, with all his cruelty and calculation, had failed to grasp. Love wasn't weakness, it was the strongest force in the universe. "No," she said quietly, then louder, "no." Her small hand slammed down on the control panel, but not on the red button. Instead, she found a cluster of switches that controlled the pit's containment systems. Alarms began blaring as the walls around them started to retract. "You're wrong about him," she shouted toward the observation deck. "And you're wrong about me." Gorak understood immediately. With a roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the facility, he leaped upward, his powerful legs carrying him to heights that should have been impossible. His massive hands found purchase on the retreating walls, and he began to climb with Aaliyah clinging to his back. Chaos erupted throughout the facility as other imprisoned creatures, freed by the same system failure, began their own escapes. The Zorak, suddenly facing dozens of angry alien predators, found themselves overwhelmed by the very weapons they had tried to control. Gorak reached the observation deck just as Grax was raising a weapon toward them. But the commander had underestimated the bond between the girl and the beast. Aaliyah, seeing the threat, pointed and shouted a warning. Gorak's massive hand swept the weapon aside, sending the Zorak leader sprawling. The ships. Aaliyah pointed toward the hangar where Zorak vessels sat ready for launch. Together, they fought their way through the collapsing facility. Gorak's strength cleared their path while Aaliyah's quick thinking guided them through the maze of corridors. They reached the hangar just as the facility's main reactor began to overload, triggered by the cascading system failures. The escape ship was built for Zorak physiology, but Aaliyah managed to activate the autopilot while Gorak squeezed his massive frame into the cargo hold. As they lifted off from Kryn's surface, she set the coordinates for the Serena colony, her heart pounding with the hope of home. Behind them, the facility erupted in a brilliant explosion that lit up Kryn's perpetual twilight. The other escaping creatures scattered to the stars, finally free to return to their own worlds. 3 days later, the Serena colony's sensors detected an approaching vessel. When Aaliyah's parents saw their daughter emerge from the ship, alive and safe, their tears of joy could have filled oceans. But Aaliyah wasn't alone. Behind her, moving with careful gentleness, came Gorak. The colonists stepped back in fear, but Aaliyah took the beast's massive hand in her small one. "This is my friend," she announced to everyone. "He saved me, and he'll never hurt anyone again. He's not a monster, he's family." And so the Serena colony gained an unexpected protector, one whose gentle strength watched over their children and whose presence reminded them all that even in the darkest corners of the universe, love could triumph over hatred. Years later, visitors to the colony would often see a small woman walking in the gardens with her enormous companion, both of them watching over the next generation of children who played without fear under the artificial sun, protected by the unlikely bond between a girl and the beast who chose love over violence. The end.